summer vacation. We're going to pray for you. Today's readings, all three of them, link together very nicely. And I think it's a very simple message, but a difficult message for us to hear. And since we are back in school, I thought I'd start with a little quiz to show you where I'm headed here. Y'all ready? Satan, believe it or not, is the first question. He asked the first question that we hear in the Bible. He asked a question when he's tempting Eve. But our quiz today is, who is the first human to ask a question in the Bible? And what is that question? Does anybody want to take a try at that? The first person to ask a question is Cain. God is searching for the brothers and finding Cain alone. God asks where Abel is. Well, Cain had just murdered him. And we all know his response. He says, "I don't know. Am I my brother's keeper?" Sometimes I think that every word that follows in the Bible is God's answer to that question. Am I my brother's keeper? The simple answer is yes, of course you are. But it's challenging, because what does that really mean? I think this is why God doesn't answer Cain with a simple yes. God needs to show us in every chapter and in every book that follows, because everywhere in the Bible we see examples of what it is to be our brother's keeper. And God is asking us to turn our hearts to him to find the answer. Am I my brother's keeper? That's where the readings take us today. And we're shown three different examples in each of the readings. In that first reading, Ezekiel tells us that we are our brother's keeper because we are a watchman. We're supposed to make sure that our brothers and sisters stay on the path. And when they stray, we're supposed to warn them and guide them back. That's our job. It doesn't mean that we become the arbiter of all things right and wrong. It just means that we need to be willing to stand up and say, "Hey, brother, check yourself. I think you're wandering into some dangerous territory." And brothers, don't let brothers wander into danger. The gospel has a very similar message, and it introduces the idea that we are our brother's keeper, not just as individuals, but together as a church. When our brother or sister sins, it impacts all of us, and we can't just write people off as too much trouble to save. Sin diminishes each one of us, even if we're not the one doing the sinning. Think about it like a three-legged race at a picnic, where two people race together as a team with one leg tied to the other. We are all bound together as a church through our baptism. And our faith journey isn't something that we can make alone. We're tied together just as surely as if we had a rope around our legs. And we need to get our brothers and sisters across the finish line too, because brothers and sisters finish the race together. Paul's letter to the Romans, the second reading, is the third and final example of what it means to be our brother's keeper today. It's a retelling of Jesus' greatest commandment: love your neighbor as yourself. In many ways, this is Jesus' answer to Cain's question. Am I my brother's keeper? Yes, so much so that you should love your brother as much as you love yourself. This is a huge task that Jesus asks of us. He's not simply asking us to watch over our brothers and sisters in some sort of detached way. He's asking us to love them, to give ourselves completely over to our brother as a sign of our faith in God. This is the commandment. Erich Fromm, who was a Jewish sociologist, once wrote that love is an act of faith, and whoever is of little faith is also of little love. Jesus wants us to all be of great faith and great love, and we do that by loving his brothers and sisters. Cain once asked, "Am I my brother's keeper?" And hopefully we all recognize that we need to ask ourselves the same question. And if I'm my brother's keeper, how can people tell? Where's the evidence? I'm not sure that being your brother's keeper is something that society today encourages people to do. But we need to do it as Christians. And when Jesus talks about brothers, he's not simply referring to family and friends, because it's easy to love the people that we're close to, the people who think like us, who look like us, and who agree with us. God calls us to love our brothers and sisters without boundaries. But are we willing to stretch the definition of brother as far as God wants us to? Perhaps that's something to think about this week. Who do we consider our brother and our sister? And what are each of us doing to keep them safe so that someday we can all enter the kingdom of heaven together? This week I pray that God will give us all the strength so that we can care for our brothers and sisters as God wants us to.